I'm currently in Paris, but we're in DC. I'm originally from Washington D.C.
Oh, if between Adams Morgan and DuPont Circle, if you
Oh,
know
dope.
that area.
Yeah. Know that area quite well.
Yeah, right on Calorama Park.
Oh, cool. Next to the Obamas.
Yeah, we're nestled between the gritty city vibe and then the Obama and Ambassador neighborhood. It's a nice
Yeah,
mix.
exactly. The whole. How long have you been in DC?
Since a week before the 2016 election.
Oh, okay, cool. So you know the whole. You've experienced an embassy day.
Yes, I have. It's super cool.
It's a good time.
Yeah.
I'm in Spain right now at our headquarters.
Awesome.
Nice. Got a good amount of people in the crowd. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Super pumped for this chat with Doug and Scott. Scott, right?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, just I was thrown off for a second because what does the R stand for at the beginning?
So my real first name is Ricardo, but I've always just been called Scott.
Nice, good to know. I just wanted to ask just to make sure.
Yeah, no worries.
Cool, so we'll just give it a couple more minutes. I was just sharing out some tweets, making sure everyone knows we're live, and then maybe in like 2 minutes we'll kick things off. What's the coolest thing you've seen so far at EthCC, Scott?
I'm legitimately right in front of the Eiffel Tower right now as the lights are like sparkling at night. It's crazy. I wish I could. Maybe I'll tweet it to share it. Actually, that might be the best like way to do this. I'm not that good with Twitter, but
It's all good, man.
there you go.
Sounds like you get a nice party going on too.
Yeah, it's like it's a boat party that's left an hour and a half late. So it's with
Nice.
it's with 1 inch and scale.
Oh, cool. That should be super fun. Doug, are you in Paris as well?
No, Washington, D.C.
Nice. All right, so it's a little bit after, what is it, 2 p.m. Pacific time right now? So thank you everyone for tuning in today. I'm joined by my amazing guests, Scott and Doug. We're going to be talking about some pretty cool stuff regarding NFTs and the future and where things are going from their perspectives. We're doing good. We host weekly discussions on Twitter Spaces and on our Discord, basically to educate and teach people about NFTs, the blockchain space, and just kind of expose them to some really cool people doing cool things in the space. So this week we're joined by Scott and Doug, and I would love for them to give a quick background on themselves and what they're doing. And yeah, I'll let you guys take it away from here.
Great. So excuse the noise in the background. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm Scott Salandy-Defou. I'm one of the founders of Liquidstar. And what we do is we have designed a retrofitted solar-powered shipping container, and we charge between 80 and 160 batteries. And then from there, with excess electricity that doesn't go into charging the batteries, we mine Bitcoin, and we also mint carbon credit NFTs on Ethereum.
Hey everyone, this is Doug Miller. I'm the global markets lead at Energy Web. I'm based in Washington, D.C. And just very briefly, EnergyWeb is a global nonprofit organization founded in 2017. And our core focus is to develop open source decentralized technologies that support the transition toward clean electric grids around the globe. In other words, the extent to which decentralized technologies support the energy transition, that's what we're focused on. And to support our nonprofit mission, we do two things. We build open source decentralized technologies, ranging from, for example, the public EnergyWeb chain, solutions to create digital identities for energy devices and energy customers, and software toolkits to help companies build platforms and apps of their own. And the second thing we do is we have a global member ecosystem of energy companies, electric utilities, and grid operators, where we learn from them about what are the needs in the energy sector and where can decentral technologies help. And then we also work with them to help these companies make use of the technologies. The last point for the intro is that we are a co-founder and co-convener of the Crypto Climate Accord, which I imagine might be part of the conversation today.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing, Doug. Really cool stuff. I know I've had the opportunity to speak with Scott a bit about some of the projects he's working on. Lots of really great stuff. And Doug, I can't wait to hear more about the work that you're doing, especially when it comes to energy and like climate. So maybe the first thing we can start off with is, what are both of your experiences in the blockchain space, in particular with regards to NFTs? And I guess, what are some of the things you're working on that are applicable to that space currently? Maybe Scott, you want to start off, and then Doug, follow up?
I'm going under a bridge right now, so can Doug go first, and then I'll jump in.
Sure.
Yeah, of course. Go for it, Doug.
Sure. So my background is in energy and environmental markets and behavioral science, and I was previously at one of the co-founders of EnergyWeb, Rocky Mountain Institute. So I came to this space from an energy lens in particular, and so to date, I guess for your first question, the way my sole focus and interest, to be honest, is around NFTs and other crypto and blockchains, is the extent to which we can make sure that all of these systems and products are renewably powered and prove it. And that's, I think, something that's something that the industry is realizing that it has to do to reduce some of the public pressure on the sector. And I can share more about the thinking on this later. And in terms of our work at Energy more specifically, we've been building various tools to make it easier to use things like NFTs to procure renewable energy and carbon offsets in a fully digitized way. So another way of saying this is, one, let's make sure that all of these interesting things that people are developing are linked to verified renewable energy or carbon offset purchases so that we can eliminate the environmental impacts of them. And then secondly, when and where it makes sense, how can we use these technologies to support the energy transition and tackle the climate crisis? Where to provide one or two examples of EnergyWeb's work, we, for example, for the past few years have been building a software development toolkit called EnergyWeb Origin, which essentially helps other companies build renewable energy trading systems where you don't need a third-party seller or broker to purchase renewable energy. Instead, with this type of software, you can capture the full life cycle of each renewable energy unit, digitize it, make it possible to purchase this as a buyer, and then update the respective tracking systems that are in place in each country across the globe. And for this, we use the ERC 1888 standard, which is interesting because it's an NFT, but it captures one benefit of a fungible token in the sense that one renewable energy certificate is the same as every other one renewable energy certificate. They're interchangeable, but at the same time, we can capture the unique attributes of each one, meaning if I need to buy renewable energy in Thailand, or I want to buy it in Turkey, two countries where we have been doing some work, for example, I can prove that I purchased 1 unit of renewables from, say, a solar facility in Thailand or a wind facility in Turkey. But theoretically, if I wanted to, I could account for these all as the same product because they all follow a particular renewable energy standard called the International Renewable Energy Certificate. One other point on this question, we're currently, there'll be more details that are published in the not too distant future, but we're currently looking at essentially how can we learn from the US dollar coin model to essentially develop a new approach to create a token representing a renewable energy certificate or carbon offset that is essentially backed by a range of those who already have vast supplies of these, and where the onus of updating the registries and tracking systems of offsets and renewables falls on those sellers. And so this, we think, will provide a way to provide vast liquidity of renewable energy and carbon offsets that ultimately those in the crypto space can source renewables and offsets directly through this mechanism. And that would use an NFT approach as well.
Cool.
That's awesome. Super, super cool, Doug. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, so I think at Liquidstar, we take an approach on the other side of this. So what we do is we're really focused on one of the core global problems, which is the fact that 1 billion people in the world don't have access to electricity. And so how we look at it is the reason why people don't have access to electricity is that it's not profitable. And it's one of the most important things that needs to happen because the amount of carbon generated from people in a lot of these markets is way less than people in developed markets. So our approach is that, okay, how can we get people access to electricity in a way that's sustainable? And what we saw is that one of the ways to do that is by using carbon credit NFTs. So we've designed our own hardware solar data logger because one problem in the carbon credit space is there's actually a lot of double counting. And there's also just like a massive premium as the carbon credits are resold. So I might sell a carbon credit to someone for $5, and then that's the end of my, like, I guess, monetary transaction. That person may sell it for 10, someone else may sell it for 20, and they may illegally split it and sell it for 40. So really on that part of it, from an NFT perspective, what we're looking at doing is we're looking at saying that, like, we have a tamper-proof hardware device that writes the amount of solar energy generated from the panels directly to Ethereum. That creates a carbon credit NFT when it gets, depending on the application and where it's deployed. When that gets to like 1 ton of carbon, sort of like removed or replaced from the atmosphere. And then from there, we sort of look at, okay, now we want to sell this on the market. So this is a great conversation because a lot of what Doug is talking about is kind of like what we want to do in the future, or we want to just sell our credits to these kinds of markets in the future. But really, again, we try and avoid talking about like blockchain, NFTs, a lot of those things, because the problem and opportunity we saw in the industry is that no one is actually focused on like who is the end customer of this and what is the benefit of that. So that's kind of the approach that we're taking. So slightly different.
Thank you so much for sharing, Scott. It's super, super cool. I'm actually pretty stoked that both of you guys have such overlapping sort of interests, particularly in like the energy sector and distributing like energy to one, places who need it, and two, monitoring energy to make sure that it's accounted for properly and that we can make wise decisions in the ways we consume energy. And so I guess maybe the next thing that we can discuss is for using this technology, like in particular for both of the projects you're working on and what you guys do. And I think you touched on it a little bit at the end of what you just said, Scott. Do we think that the words like blockchain and NFT and all that are words that need to be included in the descriptions of these projects? Or do we think that the technology over time and the way we see it evolving in the future is that this is something that will be commonplace, or maybe it will be overtaken by some new technology in 10, 20 years?
So at this event that I'm at, I was just right before I hopped on this, I was just having a conversation that I think that you should do everything in your power to avoid mentioning blockchain, crypto, etc., because no one cares. And the way that I normally go about explaining it is go on your phone, look at your apps, tell me which of those apps are using AWS or Azure. Nobody cares. The end user doesn't care about the technology, they care about the result, right? And so a lot of what blockchain and crypto, what the goal is actually to reduce cost, right? So if you think of it from a perspective of like AWS and cloud versus on-premise, the whole benefit of on cloud is that now you have this technology where I don't need to invest in building my own servers, sort of like on-premise, right? And I don't need to try and guess as I'm making that investment what my demand will be. I can sort of provision all of that in the cloud. And I think to your point, there's no guarantee that like blockchain or cryptocurrency will be a thing. And where we see at Liquidstar's opportunity is by focusing on what is the problem that you're solving. So by focusing on how do we get people energy access profitably, that gives us flexibility to sort of pivot if blockchain doesn't exist. Like right now, there are a lot of companies that are struggling because to make it work, they're relying on a certain price of Bitcoin or a certain price of Ethereum. We're not taking that approach. Our approach is that there are, in a particular community, there are 1,000 people that don't have access to electricity. How do we get them that electricity? And then where blockchain and crypto come in is like, okay, how do we actually increase our profitability? So we can use layer 2 solutions to reduce transaction costs. We can mint and sell carbon credit NFTs to augment our revenue streams. And then for us, using excess electricity, we can also mine Bitcoin to sort of further augment that revenue. But whether it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever it is, to us, it doesn't really matter. We're just focused on how do you translate energy into money to solve a specific problem.
I'll agree with Scott that I think it was Kyle the latter, that it in the end I expect that the extent to which these technologies are used, especially when thinking about actual applications like the energy space, it's going to be just baked into the solution. In the same way that the fact right now I'm using Twitter on my phone to dial into this, there's several technologies that are baked into this. I have no idea how it all works personally. And that's fine, but I know how to use the app. And in the same way, we expect that the extent to which there are all these new clean energy applications that come forward, one layer of the solution, we expect more and more will use decentralized technologies to match the growing decentralization of the grid. But at the same time, it's not that the user of the application or energy customer or even some of the companies who run the apps, they don't necessarily. I think the fact that it's blockchain or not won't matter as much. The question, I guess, is why did this happen? Why are we even asking this question? I think one thing that's going through the ups and downs of the hype cycle since 2017 in this sector, it is interesting why the question of why blockchain has been so prevalent. It is perplexing because it's to be honest, quite an awkward question to have to answer, in the sense that I'm not sure how many other technologies are framed explicitly in this way. And my own personal opinion is that part of the reason people got so curious about blockchain is that they felt more, not to sound whatever way, but they felt kind of like they were missing out on people who made a lot of money fast. And any get rich scheme, people maybe want to find a way in. And perhaps they covered it with this larger question of why blockchain, in part because some people who then tried to get in got scammed. Some people got in and realized they didn't understand it or how to get in. And I think just the way that this market evolved with people getting rich quickly is part of the reason we ask some of these, and we approach the use of blockchain in a slightly different way than maybe other technologies. But from our perspective, I agree too with Scott that it's really important to make sure you're focused on specific applications. Build something that's actually useful, and that's for us with Energy Web. We know the energy sector is being disrupted already in terms of the requirement to transition to cleaner sources of power, so that we tackle climate change and reduce emissions as quickly as possible. And knowing that our grid's becoming more complex, we have more devices that not only can produce electricity, albeit in smaller amounts, we also have devices that can provide storage, that we have mobile batteries in the form of electric vehicles. And that greater complexity means that we need better software. And so we see the technologies we're talking about today as forming part of the backbone or digital infrastructure of essentially the future grid. So I'll stop there.
I definitely agree with you guys both. I obviously I can't speak too much on the energy applications of blockchain technology, but at least one of the things I found rather odd, at least in particularly in the areas DoinGud's involved, which is like creators in the art scene, is that a lot of people are like, I'm an NFT artist, or this is NFT art. And in reality, like if you paint on a canvas, do you call it a canvas art, or do you call like a watercolor like on the piece of paper, like is it called like paper art? Probably not. And so I think as time goes on, it's not necessarily about the technology being used or the materials being used, but it's actually still just a classification of an art medium. It's still just an expression of art. And I think the same thing applies for energy as well, whether it's using blockchain technology or not. I think both of the missions that your guys' projects have are totally driven in ways where you'll find solutions either with blockchain or whatever is the best solution for your to align with your vision. So the next thing I would love to ask you guys is, what are some of the things that excite you about this space currently, with regards to blockchain in particular? And what are some of the things, and I'm sure, Doug, you probably have a lot to say on this too as well, where are some of the places that we can improve and maybe shine a little bit more light? And have you seen any sort of traction, even in like the last 6 months, to improve the space as a whole?
Sure, I can start on this one. So I guess from my perspective, I'm in this conversation purely from the angle of the climate, coming up with solutions for climate. And I'm not maybe like some in the NFT and crypto space, I'm not a technology maximalist. From my perspective, it's the extent to which technologies can help us solve societal problems. That's what I'm interested in, and I think the focus should be. So what gets me excited is, one, that this sector, maybe unlike other sectors, is getting pressure, and what our work on the Crypto Climate Accord has shown is that there's a lot of interest in folks in the sector to actually make progress toward going with clean energy sources. And so I guess from my perspective, what gets me excited about this space is the extent to which we can build tools quickly that help us make these different clean energy and carbon markets work better, so you can more easily purchase these products and verify that you've covered your carbon emissions in a quick fashion. And more importantly, given the relatively small share that the crypto sector has on carbon emissions globally, even though of course it receives a disproportionate amount of criticism, is to set a new example for then other sectors to follow. In other words, we at Energy Web are using the crypto sector to prove out and further advance different digital solutions that use these technologies as a way to then say to other sectors, okay, again, there's a lot of assumptions that we're successful here, but let's say we are successful with making a lot of progress with decarbonizing the crypto sector, that we can then say, okay, now it's up to every other sector to follow crypto's lead and kind of flip the whole narrative on its head.
So yeah, I mean, I think Doug and I are extremely aligned. So great work putting this together. What I would say is what makes me excited actually is something you mentioned, Kyle, and it's artists getting involved in NFTs, right? Because this is kind of the first time really in the blockchain space that you have people that aren't blockchain or are not necessarily tech natives, so to speak, that are interested in a new technology and propagating it to their audiences. So that kind of like concept overall for emerging technology is super important. I think where I'm a little bit less excited, I think, is just the culture sort of around the space, right? Where there's just so much hype. There's so many people that are really just trading amongst themselves in this very, I would call it like insular fashion, where like with NFTs in general, I think there was like a crypto.com thing where there's like really there's only 200 wallets, and that, but then you also have things like Top Shots, which have brought in non-blockchain natives into blockchain. So yeah, just to summarize, like what I'm really excited about is the fact that they're artists, quote unquote, cool people. Here, we were just talking to a famous rapper's manager about like what they're doing in NFTs and how they want to promote it and why it makes sense to them. I think that's super valuable. And then in the energy space in particular, I think, and just for the environment as well, I think there's just a massive opportunity to sort of focus on. Hold on, I'm going under a bridge. I'm going to go on mute. I think there's a massive opportunity to focus on actual applications and sort of how you help people. So Doug mentioned like crypto blockchain for whatever reason is getting in a like disproportionate amount of focus on the energy usage and how much it pollutes. And when you compare it to things like just people who eat meat, right? The impact is extremely, extremely low relatively. And so, what I think a lot of the blockchain technologies will be able to do is really hold people's feet to the fire, right? So, one of the first projects that kind of grew into Liquidstar is we tried to develop an environmental sensor that sort of writes pollution amounts directly to blockchain, right? And what we found is no one wants to actually install that because they don't want to be held to account that accurately, right? And so where blockchain sort of and crypto help in the energy space is really on with this idea of like trust. And then I guess a subset of that would be accountability. So that's really what I'm personally excited for is that, and I know all of us in this space, we probably have the same story. There's so many people that talk, but they don't want to actually make any sacrifices to execute, and whether it be via action in terms of what they're talking about. And so that's really where I'm excited about this because blockchain, crypto, these technologies really makes it a situation where people can either put up or shut up. So it's like, you want to say you don't want to pollute? Great. This is how we'll track it.
I couldn't agree with you more, Scott. And I think that's one of the things I know that we're super passionate about. And I think, where we all kind of align is holding people accountable for, not only like their reactions, but their actions as well, whether they're positive or negative. And that's kind of our whole angle with the social impact and kind of providing transparency, at least for those transactions, and in the future, integrating solutions that actually provide carbon offsets and actually accountability from like a standpoint of energy usage. So I definitely appreciate the work both of you are doing to kind of further the space as a whole, and also like strive to achieve various larger missions on a global scale.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone sort of in this space has come to the realization where there are just so many talkers, very few people doing. So that's also kind of why I like the name DoinGud. That's what sort of attracted me to it, is that it's like focused on the sort of doing, right? And I think that these kinds of technologies can really almost create a scorecard or the people that are actually doing and living the ways that they're talking about?
Doug, I actually have a question for you, most on this topic. Um, I guess it centers a little bit more around creators and the creators like use and maybe the kind of way like creators have the ability to like innovate and be like take action and maybe lead in a lot of sectors. From like a creator standpoint, at least maybe some of the things you've seen like either in the blockchain space or externally, um, what are some of the things that you've seen creators doing that kind of inspire you and maybe the work your company's doing to kind of shed light on like multiple sectors and maybe not just the blockchain sector? If there's anything in particular that you've seen.
Sure. Fun question. Thank you. I guess I'm going to answer it slightly differently, just to say what I would love to see creators do that they're maybe not doing enough of so far. And maybe there's an angle here, just given the conversation about NFTs, for this to come in. But in my prior role before Energy Web, I was at Rocky Mountain Institute, a clean energy think tank that actually got Energy Web off the ground. And I was in charge of an initiative to essentially change the culture around climate solutions. And one particular partnership was and I realize this is a bit of a tangent, but I'll bring it back, worked to essentially build guidance for Hollywood productions for how can we make clean energy identities, narratives, and storylines and visuals more part of popular television shows, movies, films, etc., rather than having climate be dovetailed as a side topic or something that's part of BBC specials and Al Gore documentaries. That's actually just part of normal culture, because as the data now show, more people work in clean energy in the U.S. than the dirty energy sector, and two of the 5 fastest growing jobs in the United States, even under Trump, were in wind and solar. But who knows this, of course, and so I think there's a great opportunity for creators in general to show that the majority already is taking jobs in this space, and this is even with the relatively low investment in clean energy at this time. So I think there's opportunities to, one, shed greater light on the fact that the winning side is already in the lead, but we need and then with every more dollar we put in the clean energy space, it means that many more opportunities and that many more people who can have an identity and have a story. So maybe there's some interesting angles in terms of the technology that we're talking about to either capture the different roles and identities that people play, like whether it's, say, I don't know, something equivalent to baseball cards or something like that, but people who are doing great work in this space at both national to all the way at the very local level. That's just one top of mind idea, not expecting this question in advance. So that's just a couple of thoughts. I don't know if anything there is interesting or useful for this conversation today, but that's my best way of answering it right now.
No, I think there's plenty of valuable information there. So thank you for sharing, Doug. I'm curious, Scott, do you have anything to add to what Doug was saying?
Not really. In this case, not really. Sorry. I'll just go with no, not really in this case, because I think there's a lot of stuff that's coming, but probably not ready to talk about right now.
Some foreshadowing, I see. I appreciate that. So I guess one of the next things we can kind of segue into, and maybe Scott, you want to lead with this, is as we go further into the future, what are some of the things that we can do in order to be more mindful, either in our creative or business practices and our various industry practices? And what are some of the things outside of your projects that maybe other projects that people can get insight into that you really like, that other people are working on, or maybe things that you guys get inspiration from and that are inspiring you to do better? is there anything in particular that you're following or
Yeah,
looking forward to?
yeah, I think a lot, like from a macro perspective, one thing that I always think about is that, for example, today Jeff Bezos blasted himself off into space and came back. And there's a lot of people in my network that are criticizing him because they're like, oh, billionaires, 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 they're bad. Like, but what I always say to people is that to the person in rural Nigeria, you're way closer to Jeff Bezos than you are to them. And so it's just important to always be conscious of like who is setting kind of the bar for what's acceptable. And so a lot of times in this space where people are trying to do good, we just can sort of get in these like endless circles where we let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And really what we need to be is we need to be focused on like helping and like actually improving people's lives. Like the fact that 1 out of every 7 people, none of us on this call obviously, but 1 out of every 7 people on the planet don't have access to electricity, that's a crazy travesty, right? And then when you compare that to the trillions of dollars we've spent to combat the coronavirus pandemic, it makes you wonder like what our priorities are. And so I guess in terms like just to summarize and to answer your question, like one of the things I guess I say to my friends and like just people that are close to me is like just it's important to be aware of the massive amounts of disparity that exist in the world, but also not just sort of like target the rage at inequality at the people sort of above us, but also looking to some of the people below that really don't have kind of the access to opportunity, access to information that we have. And I just one other kind of like thing on that thread is we like a Liquidstar with my business partner Connor. One of the things we always talk about is just making sure that we keep the innate sort of focus on improving the world, but at the same time, like not losing some of that capitalistic sort of like urge, right? And in a lot of the countries we're working in, and a lot of the people we're talking to, they aren't interested in nonprofits anymore at the like implementation level because they realize that nonprofits sort of create these perverse market incentives. So the example that was given to us is like, if people donate clothes, how are you going to incentivize someone to be a tailor? If people donate food, how are you going to incentivize someone to be a farmer because you're just giving it away for free? So that's kind of like just some things that I always think to be aware of is that like, I know in a lot of these circles, capitalism is bad, but it also has a lot of benefit in terms of aligning incentives and letting you know where everybody stands.
So Kyle, for your question, what gives inspiration? I guess for me, it's in the negative sense that climate change has a ticking clock. There's only so much time to stave off the worst effects that we're already feeling today. Just looking at so many places around the world. Just got off the phone with folks who are dealing with unusual floods and have colleagues who are dealing with unusual fires. And so from my perspective, the time to act is now, and we should make sure to focus on the things that have the biggest impacts, meaning in your own personal life, there are some very simple things to do. And to reduce your carbon impact, buy renewable energy, change your diet, and change your mobility patterns, meaning how you get around, and cover the rest with carbon offsets. And anybody who can afford that, the last part, the carbon offset part, should do that. The other parts don't really require any extra cost. If anything, you might even save. And more importantly, looking at the societal level, I live in Washington, D.C., as I said at the beginning, policy change is really slow. And then, of course, implementation of policy, assuming it doesn't get stuck in legal suits, which is often the case here in the US, it takes time. So in the meantime, it's really important that we tackle ways to reduce emissions from the biggest sectors and the biggest actors within those different sectors. Of course, a few minutes ago, I said talked about how the crypto sector is a relatively small source of energy. So am I contradicting myself? I don't think so, in the sense that the crypto sector has a vast amount of visibility. And if the sector does solve it, it provides that positive example for other sectors to follow. And more importantly, I do hope and believe that the types of technologies we're building will be applicable for really any other sector. So for example, we're building software right now that'll make it easier for any Bitcoin mining or any other type of crypto mining facility or miner to purchase renewables and in a direct digital fashion and then prove it. And in the end, that solution is no different than a data center doing the same thing, an office building doing the same thing, a home or electric vehicle doing the same thing. We're just starting with one particular type of device or energy consumer. So again, for me, it's inspiration is the ticking clock, and make sure that that everybody does the basics, everybody does the basics, and in your work, find the biggest opportunities to make a dent. I agree that shouldn't make the perfect the enemy of the good. And let's make sure we focus on the biggest opportunities in this space.
100%, man. I couldn't agree more. I know, I think we're all super aligned with a lot of the things we've been talking about today. And I'm wondering if maybe it's possible to bring up some audience members to maybe ask some questions, because obviously both of you have so much information about a lot of this stuff. It would be really great to maybe see if anyone has any particular questions, Hail Marys they want to throw your way. And if not, I can ask a couple more questions myself, because we do have 15 minutes left. So if anyone in the audience has any questions, please raise your hand and we can bring you up. All right. No questions right now. If anyone does at any point, feel free to raise your hand. I can just go ahead and continue. I guess, what is next for you guys? What are some of the things, obviously you've spoken up briefly about the projects you're working on. Obviously you've spoken a little bit about like your vision and where you'd like to see all of this going. What are some of the near-term things that you're currently excited about that you're working on? I know, Scott, you're at ETHCC and doing a lot of work with Liquidstar. Is there anything else you're working on that you're super pumped about? And I guess the same question to Doug, outside of like your work in energy and like creating accountability in the space. Is there anything else like hobby-wise involved along with the like, energy lines, the energy as well? Anything that you're working on as well?
So on my end, I'm super, super excited. We got our first USAID grant to sort of really focus on the energy aspect, but it'll allow us to test a lot of these things in real world for people that need it. And then on the other side, I'm really, really, really passionate about AR NFTs. Like, I just believe augmented reality and NFTs make so much sense. So I did like an augmented reality NFT drop with Danny Green from the Lakers. Been speaking to a couple of other different people as well about that. So that's kind of like where I'm at. Just super passionate to like getting something into people's hands.
Yeah, I guess just adding onto that, what I'm really excited about is the work to make it as easy as possible to position a company or a person to buy renewable energy and carbon offset products and give that full proof. That's whether we're talking about the energy sector or any other sector. I guess in terms of things that I'm keeping my eye on that are not necessarily related to my day-to-day work, but I'm really interested in and follow are developments in the clean food or clean agriculture space. knowing the multiple environmental impacts of that sector, not just on energy use, but on deforestation, water pollution, and so on. So I do think I think that's a space that maybe is where the energy sector was in its sustainability journey maybe 15 years ago. Just use the agriculture sector to capture carbon, to use that then to help increase access to food, ways to a lot less land, water, pollute a lot less, et cetera. And then as a bridge, providing these, I guess, alternative protein sources that are from a lab. So I think that space is really interesting, and I think it's one that will maybe emulate what's happening in the energy sector, but in different ways given the nature of that sector. But that's, I think, really super interesting.
Amazing. Thank you guys for sharing. I guess last call for questions. Does anyone else have any questions of our amazing speakers today? If not, I would love for you guys to maybe do like a quick plug where people can like learn more about the stuff you're working on, more about yourselves, maybe give you a follow, etc. outside of Twitter. So we'll give everyone like another minute or so to raise their hands, come up, ask some questions. And if not, then we can have some closing words.
So I will start. Yeah, like if you want to follow us, we're Liquidstar_IO. If you want to get involved to help us, I actually think like I need to have a conversation with Doug separately because there's a lot of alignment in how we're thinking about it and what we're doing. I think the last thing Doug mentioned that I feel should be more specific about is that energy is the key to accomplishing all of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. Everything relies on energy. And so once we figure that out, like this sort of like period of abundance will be possible.
Honestly, nothing really to add to Scott's comment. I love the way he closed it, so can leave it at that. And I'll just say that for those who were interested at all by anything I talked about today, in terms of Energy Web's work, definitely check us out. And those who are trying to come up with ways to specifically tackle the climate and energy aspects of the crypto sector specifically, and you want to learn more about our work in this space, check out the Crypto Climate Accord, which is totally open to everyone to be part of the solution.
Amazing. Thank you again, Doug, Scott. It was so great chatting with you. You guys are amazing. It's so awesome to hear about the work you're working on. Please be in touch. For everyone else, feel free to give them a follow if you want to learn more. Closing thoughts on our end. We do have our happy hour this week. Thursday, we have our podcast series, so be sure to tune in for that if you want more educational conversations and resources. Friday, we have our happy hour on Discord, so feel free to tune in. Give us a follow. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Any questions about our platform, anything else that we're doing, please give us a shout. We are closing submissions for our Origins exhibition today. So if you want to be one of the first creators on the platform, please send in your submission as soon as possible. We may leave submissions open for a few extra days for those stragglers. But as soon as you can get them in, we appreciate it. Shout out to Lindsay in the audience. We got an amazing submission from her. So thank you again for your beautiful work. And we look forward to chatting with you all again soon. Thanks so much for tuning in, and have a lovely rest of your day or evening.